The challenge really is what does the individual investor do and how do they benefit? And I think that's what gets overlooked. I think we look at the macro perspective, but the reality is the reason somebody's watching your show or my show is they're trying to see how they can benefit personally, financially.
The land of Arcadia.
Well, hello there, my friends. Chris Marcus from Arcadia Economics here with you on June 13th, 2008. And today we have a special guest, and a new good friend of mine is Maurice Jackson from Proven and Probable. And with all the fascinating things going on in today's financial marketplace, Maurice, it's great to have you on here and talk about the markets. How is everything going today, my friend?
Mr. Marcus, it's an honor to be on your show, and things are going well for me. Hope they are for you as well.
Yeah. Well, we were just mentioning before we started that we did have some news today, just broke, that Fed did raise rates. They're apparently they said they're going for an additional 2 hikes this year, which will be fascinating to see if that ever happens. Any general thoughts on the Fed as we kick things off here?
Well, I would just like to preface that in reference to the Federal Reserve, I have my view on them. First of all, is that they're non-elected officials that are basically doing central planning. So I'm not in favor of them, and I also view them as Keynesian economists. None of them have ever been, to my knowledge base, Austrian economists. So in reference to the Fed hike, I think it's already baked into the cake as far as knowing that the rates are coming, that they'll be going higher. The challenge really is what does the individual investor do and how do they benefit? And I think that's what gets overlooked. I think we look at the macro perspective, but the reality is the reason somebody's watching your show or my show is they're trying to see how they can benefit personally, financially.
Right. So what do you recommend, and given what's happening, what should people be doing? Because it's certainly not the easiest environment with all the things going on out there. So where are you looking at these days?
It's very simple. If the Federal Reserve is supposed to be in charge of monetary policy and they cannot articulate the single word that they're supposed to be monitoring, which is the word money, then I'm focusing my efforts on money. And for your audience and for my audience as well, money is physical gold, physical silver. If you ever look on a Federal Reserve note, the one word that you will not see is the word money. And so what the Federal Reserve is actually doing is they're expanding or contracting currency. But the benefit to a listener would be to have money, because money, again, is the ultimate store of wealth. Your currency in any nation is a derivative actually of money. And so it would behoove a listener to actually just secure a position in precious metals. And I'm not trying to use an ambiguous term because I'm not a financial planner, but the general consensus is 10% of your net worth should be in precious metals.
Mm-hmm. And what's, I'm curious to get your take. I know you also write for Miles Franklin, as do I. What's your general take on the precious metals markets now? Obviously, been a tough 7 years since the highs in 2011, especially because I think a lot of people saw the money printing, saw what was going on, and made what was, I think, both of our opinions, a logical response. Yet here it is, the metals are sitting. Gold looks like it crossed 1,300 on the announcement. So what's your take on the pricing and where you see that headed and all that?
I don't like to use a number as far as saying that I believe that the price of one metal is going to go to a certain currency equivalent. What I do like to focus on is anomalies and distortions. I think within our sector, for those that are subscribers to any given outlet, they're looking for someone to give them to feed their narrative and their paradigm of where a metal should be based off of certain macro numbers that that have been shared with us. But I look at anomalies and distortions. I'm actually a contrarian within a contrarian. So it's hard to believe. I'm a big advocate of precious metals, but right now I'm not a big advocate of gold, and that kind of stuns people and look at me and say, "Wait a minute, you write for Miles Franklin, you sell for them." That's correct. I'm advocating a position in silver, platinum, and rhodium because there's anomalies and distortions within the big five. And again, the big five, just for anyone not aware, is going to be gold, silver, platinum, palladium, and rhodium. And again, silver platinum and rhodium are really on fire sale. Now, overall, all 5 metals are on fire sale. They've been on fire sale. With all the currency expansion throughout the world, they're all on sale. And everyone is a contrarian. Rick Rule shared this with me. He and I were walking in New Orleans, it was about 2 years ago. And Rick shared something important with me. He said, everyone is a contrarian when the price goes up. You know, it's kind of funny, but in the reality is you and I are advocating positions, and yet it's really not discussed often, certainly not in the mainstream media. And so most individuals miss the sales, and they're purchasing something right now, whether it be bonds, the equity markets, CDs. They're paying full price, if not more premium, and they're missing the sales. And there's deep value propositions latent within not just physical precious metals, but also within the natural resource space when you get into the junior mining companies. And so in my opinion, this is a great time to, you know, procure an allocation in precious metals. Again, I'm not looking for that single moment where once something goes through the roof, meaning that, you know, there's a currency collapse, or one is correct that gold finally goes to this magical number. The point is you need to have it now. You don't try to get it when everyone else is joining the party. Okay. Right. So that's what I would just really emphasize, that for anyone that is naked, meaning they do not have a position, this is a time to get it.
Yeah, especially with a lot of these metals trading at basically what it costs to get them out of the ground. And I know you and I have talked before about how there's is that what they refer to as the momentum crowd, where as the price goes higher, then people jump in, and as the price goes lower, that's when people short, which is a little counterintuitive, because if you're buying after it's already moved up, is kind of countering the buy high, buy low, sell high. I mean, you're getting the opposite of that. Although I'm curious if you could dig in a little more. You mentioned not as much recommending buying gold now, but some of the other ones, which makes sense in many ways. I'd love to hear any more you could add to that and explain to people why that is.
So what I like to do is I'm not a trader, I'm a speculator. Mm-hmm. But I look at precious metals as a savings, and my savings is not based on a currency unit valuation. It's based on weight. Okay. Right. And so when you have anomalies and distortions, meaning platinum right now is below the price of gold, it is below the price of palladium. I can't recall when that has happened in recent history. So this will be the time to allocate a position in platinum. And all I'm doing is waiting for platinum to rebound back to its regular norms, historical norms. And I trade that 1 ounce of platinum per se and get now 2 ounces of gold. Whereas before, or right now, I would purchase 1 ounce of gold. And so here I'm just able to switch between the metals. The same with silver. I think the ratio currently still is around 80. So you take 80 ounces of silver. When the ratio gets to about 54 to 45, then you sell your silver position to get 1 ounce of gold. But guess what? You still have a remaining 26 ounces of silver. And so the weight is there, but you just toggle, if you will, between the metals.
Right. So, and I'm glad you mentioned the gold to silver ratio. Obviously, that one gets the most attention. Any thoughts on, you know, we've seen these ratios seemingly out of line, and it's been that way for a while. Anything in particular you think could be the spark, or what do you think eventually causes some of these ratios to revert back to where they've been historically, where folks like you and I think they might make more sense? What changes that?
Well, the market is never, in my opinion, correct on the proper valuation of something, but the market will correct itself. With regards to platinum, it's a metal that is really just found really in one place, and that's South Africa. You can say Zimbabwe, and a little bit in Russia, and some places in the United States, but they're few and far in between. So you really can get platinum from one place. Now, look at the value it has within the industry of automotive. You have catalytic converters. Now that narrative gets even better, where you have geopolitical turmoil within South Africa. You have water shortages. Then you have, and I'm adding a lot here, but you also have China. About 6 years ago, they declared war on smog. How do they defeat this smog? They have to use platinum. So eventually, the market has to correct itself. And right now, the numbers vary from different sources, but platinum is right around 900 in U.S. currency, and the all-in sustaining costs vary from different sources. But they're, you're looking at 1,200 to 1,600 right now. That's a market that cannot sustain itself that much longer. The question is it's not an if, it's a when. And when you have a when, you eventually will have a win. So I look at it as a 3 to 5 year window, and it's fine. It's just a savings account to me. I'm just acquiring more platinum, and I just sit here and I wait. I don't get upset that the market doesn't react when I want it to. I just have to acknowledge that the market will react. That's one of the challenges for someone coming new into precious metals, is they treat it like stocks. And like, wait a minute, if you have a savings account, you don't call your bank up every day and find out what's the rate of return on your savings account. But we tend to do that when we get precious metals, and you bought it at a price A, now it's at price B, and you sell. And that's incorrect. It's savings. What's causing it to move, one reason in particular, is that it's the constant. The variable is the currency, and currencies tend to fluctuate. But the point still being is, and I always like to make this distinction, especially for US-centric listeners here, know the definition of a dollar. A dollar is not what you see on a Federal Reserve note. A dollar is 371.25 grains of silver, which is 0.77344% of an ounce, which is 26.73 grams. That's the definition of a dollar, which is a Morgan and Peace dollar. Now, if you take a Morgan dollar and then you went to someone who had a Federal Reserve note, or vice versa, actually better vice versa, if they had a Morgan dollar, see if they would exchange a Federal Reserve note with you. And the answer is going to be no. Why? They both say $1. So right then we've learned that they're not synonyms. One has historical value that has never gone to a value of zero, and the other one is a currency. And every currency, not most, every currency that has ever been created does go to a value of zero.
Yeah, and it sure looks like we're getting close to seeing a couple more of them added to the list. In fact, it's interesting when you mentioned the matter of how it being a matter of when. That was something Rick Rule actually had an interesting comment on in one of his interviews recently, saying he likes investment questions where the answer is a matter of when rather than if, which, again, sometimes you have to wait a little bit. And I know our culture is geared towards what's happening today, what happened yesterday, but certainly I agree with what you're saying, that if you can think of it as savings and leave it there, that can help make a lot of those things easier. Now, along those lines, something I'd love to get your opinion on. I write and talk often about my view that the precious metals markets are heavily manipulated by the banks, selling a lot of paper that I don't think they can back up. Of course, there's differing views on that, but where do you stand? Do you feel the precious metals markets are being manipulated, and that's causing some of the trading activity that seems pretty counterintuitive at times?
I agree that all markets, not just precious metals, are manipulated. And my view is a little bit different from someone in this industry. When I first started getting into precious metals about 10 years ago, the narrative is that there's a shortage, COMEX, the COMEX naked short selling, and there's always going to be this delivery that's not going to occur, and then the price is going to go through the roof. In my opinion, that moment has already occurred. When Germany asked to have their gold repatriated, and the Federal Reserve said 8 years, if that's not a big buyer, I don't know who is. And by the way, I'm a native from Germany, so I was a little disappointed that we accepted the response of 8 years. But the point being still is that, in my view, that is certainly something that is probable, and it's something that we should, always investigate and delve further into. But the reality is what can I really control? Even if it is manipulated, then right now is a great time for me to be buying. That's what we, referenced earlier. So I don't look at that narrative anymore, to me, because that narrative is more on the speculative side, whereas I'm looking more on the savings side with some speculative aspirations. And so in that regard, I'm like, hey, keep the manipulation going on. I'm fine with it because I'm able to become a generational and financial steward for my family. Keep doing what you're doing, guys. I wish I could send them a thank you card, but probably accepted, which is a completely different narrative that we have in our industry. And it's not to say anything negative against someone that has that view, but I just take a different view.
Right, right. Yeah, and I think that's a great way of approaching it, because let's say it's not manipulated. I mean, the metals are still trading basically at what it costs to get them out of the ground, which, if it costs $15 to get an ounce of silver out of the ground and somehow the price goes to 10, either the price is going to go back up, or I'm guessing people aren't going to dig it out of the ground to get the opportunity to lose $5. So there's like you mentioned, there's a lot supporting that it would go higher either case. And then, should we reach some situation where there's you do have a break point, then just only adds to that.
So Chris, if I may, I want to pause there for a second. I think you and I have an obligation to an audience, because we have a platform now where we can speak to the world. And I think it's very important. And I think this is where I was misled initially, was that there is a narrative out there where people are trying to sell you something, which I am. I'm trying to get you to purchase precious metals. But even before then, I was trying to share with everyone the merits of owning precious metals. But I think it's irresponsible when someone tries to sell fear tactics. And I try to just be as responsible as I can. I'm aware, I believe, yes, it is being manipulated. I just don't know when,
right,
and what the effects will be. My position is that what is it that the 1% own? They own money. They own physical gold, physical silver. The 99% don't understand the sophism of calling a Federal Reserve note money. It is not money. It is currency. Take a Federal Reserve note, drop it on the ground, take an ounce of silver or gold, drop it on the ground. You'll know the difference. One's a solid investment, one isn't. But how many people are naked and they treasure it? And I get it, because we use it for day-to-day transactions. But my rebuttal to this as well is this: if, for those that are anti-gold, if gold is not money, why do central banks A, hold it, and B, should the price not have gone down from 35 Federal Reserve notes from 1971 if you've now removed it out the system? Why is it 1,300?
Yeah.
Now, the response I've received is called a flat line. That right there.
Right.
You don't get a response. And so it is very prudent to understand, if you have a long-term picture and understand that you should have money, this becomes a lot easier. You can move away from the riffraff and the fear, and just focus on safety, security. And I don't care. I was purchasing silver when it was 13, and I was purchasing it when it was 45. And I didn't feel any worse that I purchased at 45. I felt even better, because I knew that I still didn't have any competition. And I don't regret my purchase, even though the price now is at 16.75 probably right now.
Yeah, well, it looks like it almost hit 17 after the Fed news, interestingly enough.
Okay.
Yeah, right around there.
But I focus more of my efforts right now on acquiring platinum. But again, when I purchase my platinum, I don't check daily, hourly. No, you'll lose sleep. Focus on the things that are important to you, because when I first got into this 10 years ago, I probably made that. No, I did make that mistake. I'll have to be honest. I made that mistake, and I lost sleep. It affects your moods, your relationship, everything, because the price didn't go up. And the narrative was it should be going up. So how could it possibly be going down? Did I get deceived? What's wrong? What's wrong? And the answer is that you just have to take a macro perspective and understand it's savings that could become speculative.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting what you mentioned there, how there is that flat line where I spend an unhealthy amount of time searching, but with the possible exception of maybe Jeff Christian or Harry Dent, both of whom I would respectfully disagree with and are welcome to come on the show anytime and talk about it. But I don't know anyone else out there that is even making a case for the metals going lower at this point, let alone one that I agree with. I mean, there's few people are even making that argument, which again, I think speaks to what you're saying. The fundamentals paint a very good picture for investing in them. Do you even hear any arguments of anyone making a case to short the metals at these levels?
Well, anyone that's a Keynesian.
Yeah.
No, I don't hear that narrative. But again, what I want to just make sure that the audience understands is having that long-term picture, you really alleviate so much stress in your life if you can focus on acquiring. The fundamentals state that the prices should go up. Okay, it should go up. But if the prices come down, that's a bigger sale.
Yeah.
Contact Miles Franklin or your local precious metals dealer or a competitor. I'm fine with saying that, but I'm really in it for the best interest of you. Get the metals, get the money, and set it aside as a private investment.
Yep, that makes sense to me. Now, along the lines of the metals, I know you do a fair amount of research on some of the mining companies that actually go and dig them out of the ground. Be curious to hear your outlook on the miners. Any thoughts there, how they are looking price-wise to you relative to bullion? Again, I understand that's a bit of a different investment where you've talked a lot about the physical bullion being savings, but any general thoughts there for people who are interested in the miners as well?
Certainly. So again, when I got into this, I thought there was going to be a currency collapse 10 years ago, correct? And because you had all the QE and everything. And so I didn't want to have anything to deal with paper. But I now view the miners, junior mining companies in particular, that's the speculative side of my portfolio. Mm-hmm. And you have to do your due diligence on individual companies. So if you paintbrush or use a buckshot approach on looking at the sector, it's depressed right now. And all because the price of gold. Now, when I say depressed, to me, that's a good signal for me to go in there and find some great companies, deploy some capital, kick back and relax and wait 3 to 5 years. Because they really do respond to the price of gold. When we're talking about junior mining companies, that sets the tone for everything.
Mm-hmm. And do you feel that there's still the opportunity to get leverage on a miner in the sense that, let's say gold moves up a couple $100, that on a percentage basis, because of the way their profit margin is set up, that if you do get a move higher, there's a good chance that the miners would actually outperform relatively with, you know, if you get a move lower, the similar that could underperform relatively. But is that how you're seeing the correlation?
You know, a good friend of mine, Giant Bandari, might beat me up for saying this. In the answer to me as a leverage, the answer will be yes, only for specific companies. You have to realize this is very speculative, okay?
Right.
But if you find that right issuer that is serially answering questions, unanswered questions with a yes, and they need one more yes and the market responds, it really doesn't matter about the price of gold. I'll give you a good example of Nova Resources. They were 66 cents a year ago, mm-hmm. and went up to $8.66. That's about a 1,400% return. One individual issuer. You had to have that company to have that return. Right. But if you own gold, guess what? And gold really didn't move too much, you know, last year, within the last 14 months or 13 months from April of last year. So yes, there is a leverage to it if you find the right companies. And so, but I would never, ever endorse someone first going to the speculative side, which is what we're referring to right now. It's fun, it's sexy, and when you get the returns, you can pat yourself on the back and say, look, I got it right. But more than likely, you'll probably say you got it wrong. Right. And so that's why before I entered the natural resource space, meaning the junior mining companies, I made sure for myself and for my family that I would own something that would never go to a value of zero. And that is gold, that is silver, that is platinum, that's palladium, that is rhodium.
Yeah, and I think that's wise advice, especially how you mentioned before when, you know, if it gets to the point where you're not sleeping or you want to have these things working for you rather than, I mean, if it's affecting your health, then there's a cost to that as well. And setting up so you have a certain allocation in what you feel is conservative, some speculation if that's what you want, but having the portfolio match that, I think, is a good key. And I appreciate that you mentioned that.
Well, let me interject there for me. So I do get emails from subscribers. You know, they've watched an interview that I may have conducted. They were gung-ho. And again, that same ideology that everything sounds right, so these guys should be the next Novo. And the price didn't move. Price may have even gone down. And they may be either upset or have questions, or there's no press release coming out. So they abandon ship, they sell. they lost. And one of the questions I always ask them is, you know, you've heard my previous interviews. If you're a subscriber, then did you first make sure that you had an allocation in precious metals? You know what the response is usually from that type of subscriber? Well, I was going to get the metals once this thing took off. Right. And that's the wrong approach. I would just caution you, if you're having that mindset, you're probably setting yourself up for a lot of disappointment. Get the metals first. Mm-hmm. You know, get the metals first.
I completely agree with that and appreciate you sharing that. And kind of a little bit more along the lines of how you reached this point, I'm curious how you got into investing, a little perhaps about your background and how you ended up focusing on the precious metals and Austrian economics, which is not always the easiest thing to find, but how did you arrive where you are now?
I have to tell you, I'm a nerd. So I'm just a complete contrarian. I've never owned cable.
Yeah, I got rid of my TV 7 years ago, and it actually is fascinatingly life-changing, isn't it?
Now, I'll put the caveat, I have 7-year-old twins and a 9-year-old, and my wife forced me to get a television. But here's the caveat to that television as well. I purchased a television, I believe in 2010, and we took it out the box, I think, in 2014. So again, I'm a contrarian. What I do is I focus a lot of time reading and delving into a subject matter that really resonates with me, which is investing. So I got my start in real estate, really. Mm-hmm. And from real estate, when the market crashed, I said, wait a minute, real estate is supposed to be a local market. I like tangible, physical things. When the market crashed, I said, there's something I don't know. And I went on this quest. And the quest was basically started with Earl Nightingale and, of course, Robert Kiyosaki. And then I started to learn, again, Austrian economics. And I have to credit that to Robert Kiyosaki. And then, I travel a lot. So when I'm in the car or from, wherever I am in my hotel room, I'm listening to podcasts. And that's where I got my education on the virtues of owning and merits of owning precious metals. And I learned the difference between currency and money. And what is it that the 1% have? And we alluded to it before. They own money. And it's the 99% that get it wrong, that never question a politician when he says, well, the money we put over here. No, sir, that's not money. You don't put physical gold, physical silver there. You put currency there. When the banker says, well, the money you have in your savings account, no, sir, no, ma'am, that is currency. They're not the same thing. You and I had a discussion last week in reference to, what you could do at a local bank with regards to Kennedy 50-cent pieces. We could probably get into that a little bit later. But so that's what set me on this path. But I love to teach and I love people. And when I learned this, I said, wait a minute, this needs to be shared and I need to get it to a bigger platform, but I didn't know where to begin. And so a friend of mine said, hey, come to my house and let's just do a YouTube video. And I started a channel called Silver the Goat. It's still on there. I like to add humor to what I do. And I don't use that platform now, the humor side. I'm more of the professional. But Silver the Goat, I introduced the subject matter of gold and silver. And you could just show it to a high schooler and they would get it because we added, comedy to it. But it got to Rick Rule and David Morgan of all people. And I had been following them for years. They didn't even know, I had no idea that they would even watch something like this. And that got me to where I went to a conference. And I would share this also, if I may. If you've been in this sector, meaning a subscriber, and you've never attended a conference, you're missing out because that's where the networking gets to be done. And so I went to a conference, the Oxford Club Investment U, and Rick Rule's administrative assistant, Callie Farnham, who I'm forever indebted to. She's the, I call her Callie the Catalyst, but she basically said, hey, going to view Rick. I said, huh? What are you talking about? I've never done an interview. I just listened to the guy. I don't have any equipment. And I just happened to get someone that had a camera, which I brought. Long story short, I'm in the Carolinas, and a friend of mine, I flew in from California. I said, hey, we're going to go to this conference. And he happened to have part of the equipment. And next thing you know, we went down into Tampa because we were in St. Petersburg, Florida. He gets the additional camera equipment we needed in 3, 2, 1, go. And that's where we are. That's got us into Proven and Probable, because I got to tell you, it's a blessing. I'm not saying it braggingly, but when you start at the very top, you interview Rick Rule, to me, anything else is easy now. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I just like the approach you've mentioned, even aside from finance yet, in anything we're trying to do, we don't always have to know how all the pieces are going to work out. yet if you find something that's interesting and you're passionate about it, I think that's great for people to hear, that sometimes things, especially when you're on that right path, they do naturally fall in line a bit.
And a little caveat, just a little bit more background on me. So I'm a native German. I grew up in Oklahoma. I did grow up in single parenthood. I did grow up on welfare. And, you know, it's, and obviously you can see I'm a minority. And so, you know, I had a number of stumbling blocks that some people just can't seem to get over. And a lot of it has to do with positive attitude and support from, you know, I couldn't do what I do without my wife. Absolutely. My wife is, you know, the machine behind the machine. But without that support, and again, the mental toughness to go beyond, anything's possible. And I got to tell you, for me, it's divine intervention. But, you know, just to have an opportunity to meet Rick Rule, and then now to be, you know, professionally acquainted with him, you know, it's amazing. And just not just Rick, it's any of the names in the industry. We're in a position where we can interview the most respected names in the natural resource space. It's just amazing. I never thought I'd be here. The people I used to listen to now offline, they're contacting me for just side discussions. It blows my mind sometimes.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that's really exciting about the way the world has evolved, where, like you mentioned before, you just started listening to a lot of podcasts, and whether it's finance or anything else, the idea that you can pick any subject, throw it on YouTube, you get a whole range of experts, or some who might not be experts, but you can listen, see what makes sense and what doesn't. And as well, I like that you mentioned how, you know, you grew up in one economic status, yet decided, well, I'm going to learn and see and look at what people who have, you know, because there are people out there who've grown up and didn't have a lot of money. And without going too far down the conspiracy path, I do think, especially having studied a lot of psychology and the way the subconscious mind is conditioned, you know, usually what happens is that a lot of people that grow up in a certain situation just believe, all right, this is the position I was put in and where I'm stuck. But which is why I love what you said, how, all right, well, I'm here. And I mean, I grew up in a middle-class family. I worked on Wall Street. When I left, I had some rough years in between then. But again, just always thinking, all right, what is it I love to do? What is it I can share? And, you know, and like you said, you go and contact people. And if you have a genuine interest in something, I find that really speaks loudly. And it's great to hear that you've had that path, because I think that can be an inspiration for a lot of people who are sitting here listening. And maybe the situation isn't as great as they'd like it to be now, but what you've shared is a powerful formula.
Well, thank you, sir. And I do want to quote or add one more thing to that. So again, I am an immigrant. I was not born a U.S. citizen. A lot of people think, well, you were born dual. No, I was born a German citizen. Got dual citizenship at the age of 10 in Oklahoma.
Right. One thing you mentioned earlier that I think would be great to share with folks, we had talked about going to the bank and hunting down some silver half dollars. If you could share that story, and if there are any other ways, you know, maybe people don't have a ton of cash at the moment to go out and buy physical metal, but, you know, any other clever ways like that where, you know, whether it's saving the pre-1964, and actually I'll let you say it. I'll stop here.
Oh, no, you're doing fine. Okay, so for anyone listening, bankers, and as we know, citizens as a whole, don't know the difference. And this is U.S. centric, of course, because we have a global audience here. But if you go into a bank, you can ask the tellers, do they have any Kennedy 50-cent pieces? If the answer is yes, then you can ask, are any of those in the 1960s? So what I personally do is I'll go into a bank. I can look at the roll that they have of just loose. They're not within the paper, so they're just coins sitting there loosely. But any silver coins will not have any brown around the ridges. And so I'll ask, hey, can I have the fourth one and that third one there? I can easily tell that that's a Kennedy 50-cent piece from the 1960s. Now, I also asked, do any of the other tellers have any Kennedy 50-cent pieces? I am able to exchange 5 dimes, 2 quarters, you name it, with that teller. And these dimes and quarters, of course, of composition is copper and nickel. They're willing to give me money for currency. And so I'll go into a bank and I'll hand them $350 and they'll give me $70 worth of silver. I do it frequently. One recently was, it's kind of funny. I just left the bank and the teller called me back and said, hey, Mr. Jackson, I know that you like the Kennedy 50-cent pieces, but I just had a customer come here and they got these silver quarters. You probably don't even want them, but figured I'd give you a call. I said, how much do you have? Oh, just, there's just a whole bunch of rolls. And so I gave them $29.50 and they gave me, and I'm using the word dollar, $29 in the generic sense because we know what a dollar is now.
Right.
But I gave them $29.50 or $27.50 and it was $180 worth of silver.
Wow.
Now that transaction is non-recorded. I did not get taxed on that.
Mm-hmm.
I did not get taxed on that. And it's a non-recorded transaction. So my return is usually about 1,000%. So anyone can do it. And something simple you could do is sometimes whenever I'm, wherever I am, I have a spreadsheet made out of any banks that are in the local area where I may go to lunch. And I'll just call those banks up and ask them, hey, do you have any Kenny 50-cent pieces? And you'll be surprised how many answers you get. And whichever bank is by some food venue, then that's where I'm going to go. And when I go there, I do exactly what I share with you. And so I paid for my lunch basically. Now the question then becomes is, well, what do you do with it? Put it in my savings account.
Mm-hmm.
But wait a minute, not my savings account in a bank. Savings account in my safe that I have either offshore, geographical diversification, if I have enough saved up, and or a safe that I have somewhere strategically positioned.
Right. And just for folks that might not be aware, can you share the dates on the quarter, nickel, dimes, and also the pennies that actually they may want to hang on to and run that by us?
I should bring my sons down here. Okay, so if you're looking for quarters and dimes, those are going to be 1964 and older, okay, meaning 63, 62. Kennedy 50-cent pieces, you're looking at 1964, the composition is 90% silver. From 65 to 70, but you'll never catch a 70, at least I haven't. From 65 to 69, the composition is 40%.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so in other words, keep it simple here. If you got 3 Kennedy 50-cent pieces from 1964, that basically makes 1 ounce of silver. It would take about 7 of the 1965 to 69 Kennedy 50-cent pieces to make 1 ounce of silver. Your pennies, which is actually the real term is small cent, but your pennies should be 1982, 81, 80, 70s, 60s. Those are copper. Those are worth about 2.2 cents. My number may be off there, but because the composition switched to zinc.
Right.
So it would behoove you, if you see loose change, look at them.
Yeah, I was wondering what that calculation is up to now, because I believe copper, a lot of the base metals seem to have rallied in the past year or so. So maybe that penny's worth a couple more cents at this point. But that can actually be as easy as, people just sorting, looking at their coins when they get change from everyday transactions, whether the bank or anywhere else. It could actually just, if you just look through that, I mean, a lot of them have been taken out, but that is a way that people can actually begin saving precious metals without having to do anything additionally. Is that right?
Absolutely. It's very simple. We all have loose change. And again, this is US centric. I can't speak for another nation. But another thing that you could do, I referenced the 1%, what they own. And I referenced this last week in our discussion. You can't compete with them in the quantity of stewardship, but you can in quality. You're looking at a dime from 1964 that is or older. That's going to cost you roughly around $1.20. You could go, and again, I don't want you to, prefer you come to Miles Franklin, but you could go to a local coin dealer and easily purchase 1 silver dime. Set it aside. That's your first savings.
Right.
Put it somewhere, just hide it. But if you did that every week, eventually what happens? It grows.
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes addictive because you start to test. Here's a good example in reference to that dime. It takes 12 dimes currently made to equal the value of that 1 dime. That should tell you there's something wrong with your currency. If that doesn't open your eyes, I don't know what will.
Yep. And but again, it's nice where you don't think people, especially in gold and silver, which has been a little bit foreign to our generation, And even myself, when I first started getting into it, I'm like, oh, how do you actually buy this stuff? Which I find a lot of people it can be a little intimidating at the beginning. Yet, like anything, if you find an easy way to get started and then you keeps your interest and you start getting a little excited, you don't have to know everything at once. So, great starting point. And actually,
I want to share one more thing though. The best investment you could possibly make is yourself.
Yes.
You have to dedicate time. It doesn't have to be your entire day, by no means. But you have to dedicate time to learning this. The vocabulary is different. What's the difference between a numismatic coin versus a bullion coin? There's a difference in the two. What's the difference between a star note and a mule? When you're looking at a Federal Reserve note, that verbiage allows you to really make some nice returns. You just have to change your vocabulary. What's the definition of a dollar? One of the things I certainly challenge anyone, and we can probably just add the link in there for the phone number, but call the Federal Reserve. You can call them. I've done videos on it. Call the Federal Reserve and ask them why the word money is not printed on a Federal Reserve note. I can tell you what's going to happen, but I want you to experience it. Don't take my word for it. Don't take Mr. Marcus's word for it. Call and find out for yourself. You're simply asking, is the forest red or green? You'll be surprised at the dancing. They should actually put the Federal Reserve, the entire staff, put them in. I'm just aware of the show. I don't watch it. I've never watched an episode. But Dancing with the Stars, they would win. Yeah. They would tiptoe and dance all around that, and then call the Bureau of Engraving and Printing. Then
I'm imagining a reaction similar to when Ron Paul asked Bernanke about gold, and it looked like his head was going to start steaming before that classic quote where the chairman of the Federal Reserve, reserve currency of the globe, said, I don't understand gold and nobody else does either, which, at least in my opinion, it sure sounds like you understand it. So it's too bad we couldn't have you running the Fed, Maurice, and maybe
Well, pause for a second. So here's the irresponsibility of those that we vote in. Somebody else should have followed up immediately after Mr. Paul said, well, you know what? I had a series of questions here, but can you expand? You really didn't say anything in reference to that question. You're the Federal Reserve, so you have gold. Let me share something else with you if you're not aware. The Federal Reserve, not my opinion, we can add a link to it. They have not owned gold since 1934. A lot of people aren't aware of that. So when President Roosevelt nationalized, he didn't confiscate. Confiscate means you take away, you don't give something back. He nationalized and gave you currency in exchange.
Right.
The Federal Reserve, which is a private institution, had to give their gold to the U.S. Treasury. Remember, the Treasury actually should be making your currencies, all right? So this is under congressional testimony. Again, AKA Ron Paul asked the question. And their attorney, the Federal Reserve's attorney, admitted, hey, we haven't had any since 1934. So they do have, the Federal Reserve does have vaults, safe storage. The physical metal is in theirs, but like the deed to a home is actually with the U.S. Treasury. So the Federal Reserve doesn't own any gold directly. See how it's always a little nuance. It's not a direct yes or no, but yes, so they physically have it in their vaults, A, but B, the Treasury is the actual owner of it. And, but for, any congressperson to not follow up on that, how about the irresponsibility there? We missed a golden opportunity, but I can also share with you something else that when that occurred, I believe that was June 2011. Wow, that's right. June now, okay. 7 years ago. Do you know what was on TV?
What's that?
What was dominating television, and I don't mean to make light of anyone's life. It is, every life is valuable and precious. But the Casey Anthony trial was on. That dominated the news. And knowing whatever the outcome of that is now, who was guilty or wasn't, how'd that benefit you? That's what was on the news. Mm-hmm. Then that's followed up by, Trayvon Martin or something else. And you get sidetracked into really, it was called noise. It's an unfortunate situation, but the reality is knowing that, what does that do for you? There's nothing you can do about it. I reside in the Carolinas. I go between North and South all the time, but killings occur everywhere. And so you have to question now, why is the news making me focus on a local event? That's local news. People get killed everywhere. Have that mindset when you enter this, not conspiracy theory, just kind of make you wonder, okay, yeah, it was on C-SPAN, but it certainly wasn't dominating the news anywhere. It wasn't on Fox. It wasn't really, the question, what I'm referring to right now is not when Mr. Bernanke was asked the question, but when the Federal Reserve attorney, I believe his name is Alvarez, stated, we haven't had gold since 1934. The emperor said that they were naked. That, again, it goes to my point of some of the conspiracy theory of, there's going to be someone not able to get delivery. Well, okay, here's why, because they don't own it. But when they admitted it, that should have sent everyone rushing to get precious metals, and or precious metals should have gone up. And so the speculative side didn't come to fruition, but I tell you this much, because it didn't make any noise, I was able to purchase more precious metals.
Yeah, well, just another one of those factors that when the rest of the world prices it in, we'll find out one day, yet, you see the fundamentals there and they haven't changed. They just get more exacerbated as time goes along. So it is interesting. I've wondered before if the Democrat and Republican is really just a way to split people up, get them fighting against each other, hope they don't notice that both parties essentially spend a lot of money, go to a lot of wars, and I wonder if there's someone at the top just giggling all the way. And especially when you see, I don't know if you're on Facebook or not, but I remember when the Trump election was going on, just, the amount of anger that goes back and forth where people are just crushing each other on Facebook. And so again, just being able to take the step back and living a little peacefully, I find helps quite a bit.
Well, the libertarian in me says, I really don't see much difference in the two. The reality is most of us aren't really honest. We vote with our wallets,
right?
Not on the merits of the Constitution. Most people can't quote to you what's in the Constitution other than freedom of speech and the right to bear arms. After that, flatline. It just gets real quiet real quick. Okay.
Right.
So then we were ignorant, and then we were upset with one party or someone, party and or people that are affiliated with it, and not knowing facts. Again, both parties say the word money, but can't articulate what money is.
Right.
And we vote with our wallets. And it's very discouraging to me that no politician ever says, hey guys, okay, listen, hate to interrupt you here, but it's not money. That's currency. Okay. We send currency. Whenever you go to an airport, why does it never say money exchange? You always want to know when you're leaving the country, what's the currency exchange? I find it funny. I travel the world, not to digress here. When I traveled the world, I remember I was just in Australia and I had a layover, and I went to like 6 different currency exchange counters there in Sydney. And I asked them, I said, hey, just out of curiosity, you call yours money here in Australia and I'm US. Why do you call mine currency and you don't call mine money? Oh, that way we can tell the difference between ours and yours. And I said, well, wait a minute. As soon as you say United States, doesn't that let you know it's no longer Australian? So when you say the US money, but they didn't understand the distinction. So then I said, well, if someone were to steal my wallet right now, which has US currency in it, and I went to a police officer and said, hey, somebody stole my wallet, had all my money in it. You know what he would say? Well, wait a minute, you're US. Did you have Australian or US? Oh, I had US. You didn't have any money. Whew. Your currency was stolen. Yes, sir, but your money wasn't. You didn't have Australian.
Right.
My point is that each nation likes to say ours is money, and I'm US, and we like to say, well, the Canadians, theirs is currency. But as soon as I touched down in Vancouver, they call theirs money and call mine US, what? Currency. So there's sophism, which is a lie you've been told over and over again until you believe it's true. Politicians, not just in the US, but around the globe, they call something money that's not money. It's currency. Big distinction.
Yeah, which again, I think we're getting to the point where people will start caring about that again. And like you said, once the markets start moving and the money is affected or the currency value is affected, often is when catches more attention. Although again, which is why I think it's great that you're sharing all this information now so people can do something before it's too late. And along those lines, I'm adding a new feature to our interview program here at Arcadia today, which I've borrowed from great podcast by Dave Asprey called Bulletproof. And I like what he does at the end, and I'm going to pose the same thing to you. So whether it's financial market related or elsewise, what would the best 3 pieces of advice that you could offer to someone, whether that's they're getting invested in the markets or trying to learn about the markets? If you could go back to Maurice of 10 years old with everything that you've learned since then, what are the top 3 things that you'd want to share to give someone advantage going forward?
Ooh, that's a good one, but easy. The first, and we've alluded to through this entire discussion, is understanding the difference between money and currency. It's so simple. It's so fundamental. It is so overlooked. That's why people don't own it. I am not saying that because I sell precious metals through Maurice Franklin. If you look back at we referenced my previous YouTube channel, Silver the Goat. I wasn't selling precious metals. I was advocating it though, because I understood the effects that currency/money have on lives. That's, just a quick sidetrack here. People are complaining about the minimum wage should be increased, and they blame it on one political party or the other. And no, guys, it's the Federal Reserve. They keep printing or digitizing, so the more you have of something, the less valuable it becomes. But you never hear that narrative. What you hear is this or this, but no, it's these guys that are unelected officials that are trying to control something here. So your currency is being devalued, which makes us all work longer. Now, so that would be number one, understanding that fundamental difference. Number 2, I think, would be the education aspect of it is finding sources that you trust. For me, books, I love reading books. I'm a voracious reader, but simple reading. And they're on my website under the education tab, but you could look at Bob Moriarty. Great book, just came out about 2 years ago now. Nobody knows anything. So simple, so fundamental. It's a must-have. The Richest Man in Babylon. Economics in One Lesson. Mm-hmm. Simple introductory reading that my kids actually now read, and they're 9 and 7. They actually do read those books. And the third one to me would be goal setting. And goal setting is something we all overlook, but you can actually program your mind by goal setting, by writing, because your subconscious mind works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And by goal setting, taking it one step at a time, but realizing it's a process. It makes things easier for you, because when you have goals, I think, don't quote me on the source, but 97% of the world, they do not write their goals down. Of that 3% that do, 95% of them accomplish their goals. So it's really a form of self-hypnosis. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it's, I have my goals by my door. And when I walk out my room, I have to read those goals. Oh, if I forgot something and have to go back to my desk and get something, guess what I have to do again? I have to read those goals again. It deeply embeds your goals in your subconscious mind to where you don't even realize it. But what I do, I don't consider it work. I have the pleasure of doing what I love, and that's a great feeling. But that's all through, again, support from the right people, my wife, and again, through the right sources. So of feeding my mind of the right energy. And so that's goal setting. It gets overlooked in any endeavor. If you don't have goal setting, that's like going to the airport and everyone just happens to be, it's kind of like I would like to refer to any type of investment. The line is there, everyone's standing waiting to board this plane, and you got a ticket and you're just running because everyone's in that line. But wait a minute, you're trying to go to, Germany, and that's going to Brazil. But everyone just happened to be standing in line there, and we followed the crowd. It gives you the strength and fortitude when you can do the goal setting to realize, the crowd's going this way, but that's not my path. My path is this way. And that's the way I've approached my life. And it's worked out pretty good.
I think it's incredible advice because especially in trading, although it extends elsewhere, if you don't have that mindset right, you can go out and do all the research, but if you're doing things when you're angry or you're not following the parameters of risk control that you put in place, you might know whether things are going up or not, but you're not going to trade it well. And I find it fascinating. I love listening to people in different fields, and in the past couple of years, notice how they all say the same thing, getting the mindset right, just believing that you can do something, and whether it takes a little while to get there or not. Again, I just think that's great advice and 3 great tips for people. And last
Wait a minute.
question.
You know what? I'd be guilty if I didn't say this one. I have to say this one. Okay. Most people work from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. The reality is you work from 4 p.m. to 7 a.m. It's what you do between that time that will determine where you will be 5 years from now. That doesn't mean that you're getting a second job. No, that's not what it means. It means that you're now dedicating your time, your craft, your energies to something that you are really encouraged by. It doesn't have to necessarily be investing, but that's your time. If you spend that time watching television, keeping up with sports, and then your time will be lost and you won't see your successes come to fruition because you're motivated just for a little bit. And then, oh, the game's on. Did they sweep him? They did. Is he going to get traded now? It doesn't do anything for you. I would show a sports athlete, and I do watch sports, but I would basically show them the same respect they show me. When you get promoted, do they contact you?
No.
No? Okay. Do they keep up with your stats? No. So show them the same respect. It's for entertainment, but don't let it take over your life. And so what you do between 4 p.m. to 7 a.m., oh, wow, it's a powerful time that you can have. Again, maximizing that time is so precious.
Although actually, perhaps maybe that isn't the answer, because I would imagine a lot of athletes with a lot of money would be well served to be watching your YouTube channel and reading your material, and they should be keeping up on you. Especially if you get a multi-million-dollar contract, I would contact Maurice and find out some good tips of what to do with that. And for our audience, how can people find you? You're a great source of information. It's been great having you on the show today. And where can they find you? And can people contact you if they would have some questions and want to know more?
Oh, thank you, sir. The website is www.provenandprobable.com. You may email me at contact@provenandprobable.com.
Yeah, and I'd really encourage people to do that. You have a lot of great experience, and I feel like I had, maybe some of the financial parts down a while ago, but really adding in that mental perspective and creating a great mindset. So it's beautiful to hear the way that you've combined those two and gone from one situation in life to really having a lot of knowledge and being an inspiration to others. So visit provenandprobable.com, and that's where you can follow Mr. Maurice Jackson. I thank you again for being on the show today, and we'll look forward to catching up with you again soon, my friend.
All the best to you, Mr. Marcus, and to Arcadia Economics.
All right. Thank you, sir. Hit that thumbs up button below, and we'll be bringing you more of Maurice and other great guests here. And thank you again, my friend.
All the best to you, sir.